everyone. Welcome to this week's Fireside Creators. I am your host, Reverend Dr. Sherry Palace. Tonight, I am chatting with the world's most haunted city on Earth's team. I can't read, evidently. And I have two ghost stories of my own, and I can't wait to hear their most spooky stories. It's the start of spooky season. I can't even do that with a straight face. Please remember to keep all comments and questions related to the show topic and that this is a safe space. Thank you for joining us, and I'm looking forward to all of your comments and questions. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe. If you're on Facebook, grant StreamYard access so we can see your name when you have a comment or a question. Thank you for welcoming us into your homes and joining the conversation. I appreciate you all. Okay, let's meet our guests and get a little freaked out. Chris Sousey is a paranormal enthusiast with over 40 years experience researching paranormal occurrences. He is also a writer, director, actor, puppeteer, and filmmaker living in Savannah, Georgia. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, glad to be here.
I am so glad that you're here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful.
Next, we have Madison Timmons. She is a lifelong clairvoyant from Savannah, Georgia. Her specialty in investigations is the use of the Estes method due to her sensitivity to spirits. She holds a BFA in performing arts, so it was a natural fit to combine her two loves, paranormal and performance. Welcome, Madison.
Hi, how are all of you doing?
Wonderful. How are you guys doing being on the coast?
We are doing
Surviving.
Yeah,
There we go. That's the most important thing, right?
exactly. Yeah.
So
Chris, are you still in the hotel room?
Yeah, this is my hotel room.
Okay.
Because my house has no power.
soon I hear.
Soon.
Yeah, soon. But any minute now. And if you hear like strange noises, it is my dog losing his mind in a hotel room.
You might be a little bit clairvoyant too.
Right.
So let's start by you guys telling me how you got into all of this. Chris, you're up top, so you go first.
Oh, sure. So I believe that if you ever find somebody who has a deep interest in paranormal anything, they usually have a origin story, the thing that happened to them that kind of pushed them into the realm of the supernatural. My story pretty much stems from when I was 6 years old. I inadvertently broke into a haunted house in Amberg, Germany, and I got locked in for like 8 hours. So from that moment on, from being locked in that house at 6 years old to present day, I have been kind of consistently consumed by a nagging dread, fear, fascination, and need to know about all things paranormal and supernatural.
Interesting. So it really stems from fear.
Oh yes, no. I will be the first to admit that I am 90% fear motivated. I have lots of phobias, lots of fears, and I find that learning the stories behind things, even when they're terrible stories, helps alleviate some of the fear. Because a lot of fear is based in not knowing, is the unknown element of any given thing.
Right.
So even when the thing is scary, once you know it all, knowing puts it perspective, gives you, I call it the ghost trap. The great ghost trap is a ghost story. Once you have that story, the ghost is now kind of trapped in the story. It has to operate within the story, and you understand why it does what it does and how it does what it does. And so I'm a ghost story enthusiast. I love a good ghost story, and I love tracking down, people's personal stories. Always, it's the conversation I enjoy the most is like listening to people say, oh, this one time this thing happened, and then just kind of, riffing on how many times I've heard similar stories or folklore or something like that.
I get that. So you're a control freak too.
Weirdly enough, I'm not, because
Really? Okay.
Well, because I don't want any control over their story, if that makes sense.
Well, I meant like with the ghost thing. It was just
Oh no, that is lock it down for survival stake. It's like
yeah.
that's yeah. I'm very bad at control. Actually, I would love it if I were a little more like control freakish, where I could like be organized. Because I like to think that control freaks are organized.
No.
I have no organizational skills whatsoever, and I oftentimes find myself in the middle of the night in a big, broken down, empty asylum, going, "This was a terrible idea." Because that's not where you want a control freak, or where you need a control freak the most. And you're like, I don't know what's going on. Well, what am I doing here?
That's hilarious. Madison, what about you? What got you into this?
Well, Oberon obviously wanted to share first, but it's basically, I like to say that I was not necessarily given an option to not be a part of the paranormal, because I have been able to see spirits my entire life. Supposedly from even before I was cognitively aware that I was experiencing spirits. That's according to my parents, but I always trace my first encounter of a little bit of my fascination to dive deeper into it. Was an experience with my grandmother who had passed. My grandmother passed from alcoholism when I was 2 years old. And when I was born, my parents obviously weren't telling a baby about what was going on. And I wasn't very aware of anything that had gone on with her until later on in my life. But when I was about 5 to 6 years old or so, I would come down in the morning and tell my parents that grandmommy came to visit me. Now, because the end of her life was so traumatic, basically, my parents never really spoke about her. I didn't even know what she wanted me to call her. They just referred to her as my grandmother. So they were shook when I told them grandmommy came to visit me, and I could describe her exactly how she looked, and the conversations we would have, which freaked them out. But it left room where that made believers in my family, because they're like, these are things that a small child should not know. And yeah, so they allowed space for me to start exploring that. And as I got a little bit older, it was in the height of TV paranormal shows, which was great for a kid like me, because it showed me that there are people who are interested in this ability that I have. And even though I kept it very private for most of my life, honestly, until about 2.5 years ago when we started this podcast, I didn't talk about my seeing spirits and whatnot. So yeah, it was nice for me personally to be able to see, okay, people go and hunt ghosts. They want to learn about these spirits and stuff. So yeah, I would say that was kind of my origin story. And now that's what I do all the time. So
Wow.
yeah.
Well, I'm sure that it validated you and had all of these other things that you needed as a child to be able to go forward anyway, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and it's great TV too. It was always fun to watch people going into these creepy places. I was also the kid that read history books as like my book of choice. So I loved learning the history of these places and these hauntings. So the storytelling aspects were fantastic.
I love that. So can I tell my two stories?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so one is kind of by proxy. Because it was my mom and my stepdad. My stepdad got a job in Waco, Texas, and he went to go find us a new home. Um, I didn't like him at all, so let me just throw that in there. But anyway, there was a big fight when he got back, because he had lost the camera. To the house that they wanted to buy, so he couldn't even show my mom the pictures. He did have one roll of film with him, so they got that developed, and everything ended up falling through years later. So I was probably 7 or 8 when that happened. Fast forward 12 or 13, my mom and my aunt are looking through the photo albums and notice this picture. It has to be in Florida. I tore my entire apartment apart trying to find this picture. But they were split up at the time, or divorced at the time. So she was dating a guy who was a cameraman for General Hospital, and that's incredible. So she gave him the picture, and he had it researched, and it was on the show. The picture is of an empty yard, so it's not any type of reflection in the window. You can see it plainly that someone is standing there, but it is fully gray. The research said that her hairstyle indicated that she was single. She was in a costume and had a musical instrument around her neck. And they said that she probably took the camera. So, yeah, I have a picture of it and I can't even show you. I hate that. I hate that. I mean, I'm sure I took the picture somewhere and I took a picture of it, but I have like 40,000 photos, so I couldn't find it. But yeah, so it was on. That's incredible. And Chris and I were talking backstage going, we're really going to date ourselves.
Yeah.
That used to be a show showing these types of things. So it was on there. And because my mom was dating the cameraman.
That's fantastic.
In Waco, Texas. Yeah, it was really cool. So it was like, I actually you can tell it's no shadow. There's nothing in front of the windows, and she's clear as day. Can't see through her, but it looks like a shadow, very gray.
Yeah, we get a lot of photos because we do a segment on the show called Ghost Mail. And basically, usually people just write in their stories of what they've experienced, but we do get a lot of photos in as well. And I find that the most common spirit that people capture in photos are those kind of shadowy figures where you can tell some of the essence of the person, whether it be hairstyles or certain pieces of clothing and whatnot. Chris had always a really good analogy about why spirits become kind of that shadowy shape. I don't know if you want to go ahead and explain it, Chris.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because most people can agree that there are different brands of apparition when you see a ghost. There's the very clear cut, I know who that is. It's like, oh, it's Abraham Lincoln. I recognize him. Looks just like Abraham Lincoln. And then over time, if it was like your Uncle Bob, and your Uncle Bob was haunting your house, you knew what Uncle Bob looked like. You see Uncle Bob, and you're like, hey, it's Uncle Bob. And he retains all of the features of Uncle Bob. But pretty soon, people who don't know Uncle Bob are going to encounter him. And they're just going to call him a man. There's a man here. Okay. And he's going to start losing those features that made him Uncle Bob. And he's just going to be a man. He's going to slowly dissolve away all those identifying markers because he's holding on to what the living can identify him as. And through time, they fade into shadow where there's no shape, but they just know there's someone there or something there. And now you're looking at a shadow figure, a shadow person, because now they don't have any definition. And I oftentimes say that that's a dangerous time for a spirit, because when you see a shadow and you say, it's a demon, it's still trying to live out that connection. It's like, oh, this living person is identifying me, giving me form, giving me shape. I can do this. I can be a demon. I can be a devil. I can do this.
Wow.
Because they're trying to maintain a connection to this plane and this world. And that's, for people who have that classic concept of what a ghost is and how a ghost is a spirit that just will not let go of this plane and has interactions with the living. It's like, well, what are they really after ultimately? They're kind of after a prolonged life, having more life than they did, and the way they do that is by interacting with us, that haunting.
I had a woman who just wrote a book. In fact, I think it releases in a couple of weeks. Her grandmother comes to her through her Roku TV.
Oh,
and types hi, has conversations with them. And the grandmother says that she doesn't want to go on. She wants to stay with her family. So what you're saying, Chris, as far as maintaining that thing, as that hold and that vision with people, that makes sense to me after hearing her story. It was wild.
Well, yeah, and people want it to be like some high drama thing. It's like, oh, you're murdered and you're looking for the man who killed you. No, it's just holding on to life and not wanting to move on, not wanting to leave the things that you love behind. The unfinished business can just be being alive. It doesn't have to be this, penultimate, like, oh my God, you left, this immense thing undone. It's like the undone thing was living another 20 years. The undone thing was appreciating the people in your life while you were around, So yeah, you take a little demystifying stance on it and say it doesn't have to be grave peril or vengeance. It
Right.
can just be you loved life and you don't want to leave it.
Before I tell my second, you got anything to say, Madison?
Yeah. I mean, so my question is, did you gather any information about the property at all, or?
No, that was, I mean, it was found so many years later
Mhm.
that we just had the picture. And the only thing that was researched, to my knowledge, my mom has been gone many, many years. But the only thing that was researched for that was the photo. They didn't research the land. I mean, they said, look, there's no shadows here. I mean, what was it, the 80s, 82,
Sure.
83 that this was, was on?
I feel like film cameras especially were such a
One,
exactly. They were a great tool for capturing spirits. I don't know what it is about them, but I feel like a lot of the really interesting and well-defined photos that we've seen in, years of looking at ghost photos and whatnot, a lot of times it's, film cameras or somebody is recording on like their home video camera or whatever, and something passes through, and they're always the most interesting pieces of evidence. And I think it's because a lot of times, with film, you can write off, oh, that's just like a little bit of a defect on the actual film or whatever. So when you can actually identify something out of it, it's extraordinary.
yeah.
But I think that's super fascinating, and maybe it was something to do with the property that was keeping her there, making, maybe she enjoyed observing people who were coming through, which happens a lot too.
I do remember them saying late 1700s, early 1800s as far as the date.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
And the way she was sat. I don't remember if her hair was up, which meant she was single, or her hair was down, which meant she was single. They were able to denote those types of things due to the era. And then, like, not long after that, the Waco whole thing blew up and
Right.
all of that, which my mom again said, I was raised evangelical through her, so of course they were demons. Of course they were demons. Of course they were demonic and stole my stepfather's camera. When he was just an idiot, he probably just lost it. But we did get a picture, and he luckily took that film out of the camera before he lost it. To be able to get that.
I wonder if maybe if she was a spirit from the 17 or 1800s, if she saw, if the spirit did take the camera, it could have just been this fantastic looking thing, it'd be like seeing something from the year 3000.
Yeah. New
Just,
toy.
exactly. It's like, what is this? This is insane. But
I took selfies. That's where it all started.
that was the original selfie. Absolutely.
Okay, my second one, and again, because of my evangelical background, I really was terrified. It started, I lived in the first place on my own as a single mother. I was 21, and it started with the dishes. I had a 2-bin sink, and the dishes were being separated. Like, they would start on the right side, and at the next day I'd wake up and they were going to be on the left side, or vice versa. Didn't think much about it. Started joking that I must be talking or walking in my sleep, because I do, and really disregarded it. The next thing that happened was I was getting ready for work in the morning and I smelled smoke. I had a Garfield stuffed animal on top of a 6-foot bookcase. Right next to it was a lighter. I came from the bathroom and getting ready, and the Garfield was on fire. The only other person in the house with me was my son, who was 1. I again wrote it off and thought that the lighter just ignited. Just thought the lighter was fine. It wasn't exploded or anything, but the Garfield was on fire. Things started getting weird when I had a friend over for dinner. I was making him spaghetti, and I would go to grab the tomato can of spaghetti or tomato sauce, and it would race out from under my hand. All of the cans were doing this. Every time I'd go to grab one, it would just race across the stove. So I called my friend in, and I'm like, look at this, but like a party trick, again, not thinking anything. A couple days later, I was awakened in the middle of the night, being pinned to my bed. It was a water bed, and they were jumping on the side. So I was on the water doing this, screaming, what the fuck is going on? It then went away. I immediately reached out to some people. I called my mother-in-law. Why, I don't know, and she said, you must have it's all of those rock and roll CDs that you have. It's all of those rock and roll CDs. And I had just bought a damn Yankee CD. And I'm like, son of a bitch, that's what it is. But then it became like a trickster. It would wake up my son. My son and I were sharing a room. He was at the crib at the other side of the room. And I would wake up in the middle of the night and see him standing and see this haze over him. That I was folding clothes one day, sitting on the floor, and I had my lighter and my cigarettes right next to me. And I turned and they were gone. And I literally said, okay, put them back. And I turned away and went back, and they were back. It got so much of a pain in the ass. People would not come to my house. I had a girlfriend of mine do a prayer. This all over about a course of about 6 weeks, this happened. And when she did the prayer from my bedroom, there was a huge thing of wind come through. I went to my pastor and said, something's going on. This is nuts. And he was like, oh, it's just a poltergeist. Don't worry about it. But refused to come over and hold a prayer. And so finally, I went to my landlord and said, you may not believe me. You come stay in. It always happened Thursday morning, like 3, 4 a.m., between 1 and 4 a.m. on Thursday mornings for some strange reason. But when I went to him and said something seriously is going on in this house, he immediately let me out of my lease and said that the previous tenants was a husband and wife and a mother-in-law, and the husband had put the mother-in-law's head through a wall. And so he was put in jail and they were evicted, and then I moved in. But I got the hell out of Dodge, moved and got out of there, and never happened again.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Multiple people saw it. I mean, it was crazy. And then when I started putting everything together, I'm like, my Garfield, it lit my Garfield on fire.
Pyromaniac ghost.
Right? And my mom, there was a smell in my apartment, and my mom was like, demons smell, that's what this is, and I'm not gonna, your house is full of demons. And when I was finally moving out, I found out that it was the kitchen water tray. Oh. So, and she's helping me, and I'm pulling this. I'm like, here's your demon, Mom, here's your demon. But I also joked that it had to have been a man, because a woman would have actually done the dishes instead of moved them. And it was a trickster, a pain in the ass trickster.
And where was this?
It was in Santa Clara, California in 1991.
That is an incredible story. I mean, I'm sure
Really?
that was frightening for when you were experiencing it, but it's insane to say the least.
Right. So
Yeah.
I've been a believer for quite some time. I mean, I was literally pinned to my bed.
Wow.
And I'll never forget that, because it was like someone was jumping above me in the waterbed. So I was doing this, just completely paralyzed and pinned. And then poof, it went away.
A part of me, well, at first I thought poltergeist activity, because a lot of that sounds very classic poltergeist activity.
Said.
Yeah, I mean, which, but at the same time, a lot of times you don't necessarily get poltergeists that make contact.
Yeah, the physical part is what kind of throws off that denotion is, because there's,
That was the
and it's such a
grand.
hard thing to even kind of describe is, imagine trying to move something with just your brain, because spirits don't have muscles, bones. There's nothing that they're, so if an object is moving, the kind of kinetic energy, the kind of forceful energy that is happening must be, of such a degree that it can affect our physical world. And that brings in all kinds
scary.
of things.
I've made jokes about this for 30 years and now you're scared. I mean, it really did. I mean, it was I got rid of the waterbed. I mean,
Wise move.
Yeah, it was, it was time probably anyway. But like I said, it was like someone was standing above me and just jumping from side to side to where I was. And the physical nature of the fire and moving the cans and the dishes, it was all physical in that place. I mean, I had a fear for a couple years that it might have followed me or something, but it didn't. Nothing ever happened again. I moved out, washed my hands of it, and
that does sound like it's localized. It sounds like it is, it is that place, and it makes me wonder if the family before weren't suffering from the same oppression that you were suffering from.
Yeah.
And it's not their spirit, but it was whatever was causing them to be so damaged and damaging.
Right.
Because there's a lot to that. Fire being one of the big ones is, there's a reason why fire is almost always associated with like a demonic presence, is because it's this chemical reaction. It's this, there's much more involved in a fire than, say, tapping something or pushing something over. There's a whole chemical
well, the lighter was
right
there. The lighter was right there. I mean, and at that point, we're talking 80s, lighters were exploding.
Lighters were pretty,
So, that's what I thought. I mean, I never thought, well, the lighter is whole. It doesn't have any damage. I didn't go, I was 21. I didn't go any further. I was a single mom, got to get to work. Holy shit. I was really bummed my Garfield had burned. Wasn't even thinking at that point, this could be a ghost until the night that I was pinned. So at that point, it was like, holy shit, this is a ghost, and things just, then it was one night, it woke me up and I'm running through the apartment, screaming. But I mean, if there had been someone else there, I think an instinct would have been to blame them, right? So if the three people there before me, if she was saying, why are you doing this? What's going on? Or they were experiencing something also, it may have turned internal because of just the friction of things that were going on. I mean, it was high stress. It was definitely high stress.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, anytime you're going through an intense paranormal ongoing experience, it can be very stressful because it is a bit invasive to your personal space. So, part of me, so what's interesting is the word that you chose to describe it as a trickster. I have always had this theory, and it's honestly based off of a spirit that's in the space where we filmed the podcast. We refer to it as a trickster spirit because it's kind of a low energy, a nuisance spirit, if you will. But the way that it acquires energy is by instilling fear. And so it could be something similar to that. That particular entity that's in the space, probably the most intense thing that it's done because it shapeshifts into certain things.
Oh, wow.
It's very intense. And we also have a theater that operates in the same building. And one of the actors played this entity called the Hag, and he had a whole monster mask and everything like that. And during this rendition of that show, the Hag gets trapped underneath a haint blue net and whatnot. And so he has to lay there for a good portion of the show after the scene ends. And so he's laying there dead, trapped in the net, and he sees and feels this person that looks exactly like him in the hag costume coming up to him, and he felt it crawl on top of him, and it felt like it pinned him down. And we've always assumed that was the trickster, because every other experience people have had, it always seems to be, an entity that we've never encountered before, or, it always seems to be very brief, but very intense. So maybe it could have been something like that, where it's like, it's going to scare her. Fire,
Right. I mean, and I'm in the other room. When I started to really become fearful is when it started waking up my son.
Mm-hmm.
So, like in the middle of the night, he'd be standing up in his crib laughing hysterically. And I could see, like a squinting, like I said, that haze just over his crib. That was the only visual that I had ever seen. But then it was like, okay, why are you messing with my kid? You can do whatever you want. You can take my lighter and cigarettes. I need to quit smoking. But, you can even but don't mess with my kid. But he was always laughing. It was never scared or crying or anything like that. Just standing up at his crib in the middle of the night, cracking up.
Which honestly makes sense too, because, the other emotion that it instills the most energy is laughter. Fear and laughter. Those are like the two things that oftentimes, if an entity is going to do, it's going to do one of the two. So it makes sense maybe in that idea, but I like the concept of it being maybe a trickster. That feels a little... Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I still have the damn Yankee CD, so it wasn't.
Everything worked out. It's...
So what are your guys' best stories that you've heard or experienced?
Ooh.
Oh, good Lord. And we kind of my dog apparently has a lot to say about it.
He's like, I've seen a lot.
Just like, okay. But so I have like a sliding scale ghost story process. I have like my 5 go-tos that I'll tell people under different circumstances, and depending on how much damage I want to do to somebody's psyche. How much do you want to hear about something that might ruin like your perception of reality, or do you want to just hear something that creeps you out for a day? And usually the situation tells you what story suits. Sometimes it's oh well, here's the story about the night that me and all my friends went out to the witch's graveyard in Allenhurst, Georgia, and we had a good scare, and that scare is very immediate and it's right there. In Allenhurst, Georgia, this small tiny, like, you have to go through a maze of dirt roads to get to, creepy itty bitty cemetery out there, and it had all the trappings of a perfect ghost story. And me and my friends, we all went out one late fall evening and had and I think everybody who went had a different horrifying experience of their own.
Oh wow.
That they kind of came back and then blamed me for exposing them to it. But I always think of that as kind of like a party trick story.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
As the party trick story of it is, nothing consequential really happened. It was just a lot of noise and vigor and strangeness and bizarrety. And it was like, that's enough that it could have been just our heightened emotions. We're reckless teenagers. We were kind of fueled up on a ghost story to begin with. So, there's a lot going into it, but it tells well. So when you're telling a story, you're like, okay, here's a story that tells well. The night we went to the witch's graveyard. Conversely, I have a story of a friend who did Bloody Mary as a full-fledged adult and went on to kill himself. That story wrecks people. Like, when they hear it, they're like, holy hell, why did you tell me that story? Wow. And so it's like, that's a reserved story for like a serious sit down and say, okay, look, These are the dangerous elements of. My dog is literally barking into the mirror. Let me see if I can show you. He's barking into that mirror.
It's like, Dad, it's a portal.
You just said Bloody Mary. You said it twice.
Okay, so that really prompts me to, like, I was never afraid of. In fact, when I watch on TV, yes, you're beautiful, baby. You're beautiful. I'm always like, why are they so scared? It can't hurt you. Yeah. So again, what you have said about my stories makes me more freaked out. But
well, so this is the interesting thing, and it kind of comes into this terrible place. I think that one of the things that you talk about a lot is we've ruined God. How belief structures cause people to alter not just their behavior, but actually how they interact in everything, because their belief had made something that wasn't real to them. That level of reality that is built through belief alone is destructive. It can be wholly destructive, because they may choose a belief that is dismissive or abusive or difficult. Now here's the scary thing. Fear is a type of belief. When you feel fear, you have given up.
Correct.
On not of it not being there. Even if your brain is like, that's not real, the fear that you feel is a type of faith. You have faith that the thing is going to harm you, the faith that the thing is going to be capable of doing harm.
Right.
And when that comes into play, you have to really start thinking about, well, what is the weight of belief? Can my belief cause me physical harm? And if that's true, when does my fear go from being something that I hold at arm's length to something that I've embraced so much that I'm now causing myself harm? So because it becomes philosophical questions then.
Right.
You know, we're now out of the realm of the boogeyman coming out of the closet and grabbing your feet.
Right.
And succumbing to a reality that is very much at our beck and call, very much what we make of it based on the beliefs that we invest fully into. So, you know, the conversation goes wildly out of control, because we can talk about literal spirits that have abilities to come in and poke you in the eye. That's a very damaging and weird thing to happen. The spirit comes and pokes you in the eye.
Which did happen to me.
Which has happened. and that's like, oh, that spirit is manifesting a physical, you know, ability to do this by its own measures and means. And it's like, yeah, but what is the human body if not a very well constructed agreement of molecules that says this is what we are, and we're going to manipulate this way. And who's to say that there's not some entity out there that can manipulate whatever else that we can't see, can't judge, can't figure out, to do the same? And now we're dealing with, oh, you know, are we dealing with other dimensional beings? Are we dealing with, you know, our own conjuring ability of broken faith that appears as fear, and then it conjures these things, it coalesces them into something that can be harmful? It becomes very difficult to say, but it's a trap. It's like, oh, the second you're afraid of it, it might hurt you. So don't be afraid of it. But now I'm afraid of it because it might hurt me. But only if I'm afraid of it. So I got to be not afraid of it.
Right.
But I'm afraid of it.
Are you guys aware of Bob Larson?
Yes.
Yes.
So my mom, huge fan, got me into it in the 90s.
Right.
Now he just makes me laugh hysterically.
Sure.
But that's what I have always seen with the type of people with the exorcisms that he does. I don't mean to be judgmental, but I end up looking at them going, wow, you've got issues. And I think that's probably what you're trying to describe, Chris, right? Is where, your beliefs come in and
that becomes that placebo effect, right?
right, right. And to see that. And I struggle with this because I literally have firsthand experience with a ghost, but yet I also feel like there is nothing outside of us.
Sure.
I believe that there are demons trying to make us do things. I don't believe, that there is anything other than an ego and love. But I still know that that happened to me. And then hearing that guest a few months ago talk about her grandma coming through her Roku was just like, there, I'm okay with not knowing. I'm totally, I am an ex-evangelical, so I'm okay with not knowing now. But there are things that it's like, how do you balance that? How do you balance there's nothing outside of us and there is a spiritual realm? Or can you?
I feel like a lot of it comes from once you have an experience that you can't explain,
Right.
is where you start to create that questioning sensation. And I think it's healthy to have doubt about there being certain um, evil entities or what have you. And honestly, it's probably good for all of us to have that little bit of healthy doubt.
Right.
It keeps us sane. Um, and I would say the majority of people would choose to believe that that's fiction. And it's really only people who have encountered certain things that are very intense about it. Because I would say the majority of people will never experience something
Right.
demonic in their lifetime, which is great. And also is the reason why most people don't see spirits, or experience spirits daily. Because if you did, you would feel like you're in a crazy house.
Right.
So I think my point with all of that being is really it's allow yourself to believe as far as you feel healthy believing. Because you don't want to let yourself get to a point where you're so in fear of things that are unknown that you can't function in a daily life.
Right.
Sometimes
So many shows on Don't Live in Fear.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's and like I've personally encountered entities that are very frightening, and I see spirits very regularly. But I think I was a person that was given that ability because I was able to handle it.
Right.
Not everybody can do that. So I would say believe as far as you are comfortable believing, and then anything else is just fun to listen to.
There's some irony in the fact that the evangelicals believe in demons but not ghosts. And
it's a very difficult line.
It's automatically a demon, and automatically bad. There was no physical harm in what happened to me, but it was that's why I gave it the trickster name. It was like, wow, you are a huge pain in the ass. Wow, you're a huge pain in the ass. So,
well, it's interesting because I when people ask about demons, and I use the word demon a lot, or demonic, but not to mean the horned fallen angels. It's just the easiest term to use that everybody kind of gets behind and understands. Oh, that's a bad thing. But I always say it's like fire. Like imagine primitive man coming across a fire, and this fire is just raging. It's moving around. It's eating things. It's, it seems alive, and there's reason to believe that it's alive. If you gave it food, it would, in fact, continue to live.
Okay.
If it got on you, it would hurt you. It would burn you. You have to learn how to treat fire with respect. But what if that was the same with a spiritual energy, an energy that we don't understand, we have no concept of, but it's out there just roaming about? We would call it evil if it hurt us.
Right.
Like when a wolf takes a child off into the woods, that wolf is the big bad wolf. It's the evil wolf. It's like, but it's not an evil wolf. It's doing what wolves do.
Right.
That's nature. It's a natural thing. We believe in evil. Humans constructed evil and decided what evil is and decided to make it a principle that we have to fight against. But nature is very much entropyful and very much full of tough breaks and unfair situations. So
Yeah.
we come to this notion that we started identifying these spiritual encounters, some that gave us elation and some that gave us damage, and we decided that the damaging ones were evil and the elating ones were good. But it all boiled down to now ritual. How do we behave around these energies? What can we do to make the energies serve us? You know, how do we make the fire cook our food?
Right.
How do we make the demon grant my wishes? You know, how do we make the angel bless my home? We start constructing rituals, and rituals are just a way to solidify our encounters with energy. You know, we denote what worked, what made it happen, and oh, you know, if I'm patented, if I'm on my knees, if I do this, if I do that, we come up with all these things that we are basically reinforcing as the conditions of these spiritual entities. So it isn't a which came first situation. Rituals came before the thing that we identified. You know, we negotiated with nature and then gave all these things names. You know, and we just like
Right.
started naming things and judgment and you know, trying to figure out how best to keep our collective safe and hurt the other people or the other collective. And that's, you know, it's such a tricky thing, because whenever anybody asks, you know, how do I resolve, you know, not believing in anything beyond us and having experiences like this, and the answer is because we don't know.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with not knowing.
Right.
And that's the problem, is we think there is. We think ignorance is somehow a lowly state. It's like, no, it's a natural state.
Right.
The things that we don't know, we generally should not concern ourselves with. That's where we go wrong, is we go into the, you know, into the dark shadows and go poking around because, well, we don't know, we're going in. But the truth of the matter is, if we just avoided it with a simple, I don't know what that is, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to participate, you could live a completely stress-free life as far as that's concerned. But you know, when people start saying, you know, but you know, science tells us X, Y, and Z, it's like, yeah, but science is always advancing. We're always learning more, and every time we make huge advances in science, we just learn a new area of what we don't know. You know, we like right now, there's all this talk about how when we get down to the absolute lowest, smallest molecules of the self, of the being, of reality, we're not 100% sure what it is that connects everything. Like, why is my hand this set of molecules and this wall is this set of molecules? And they're like, well, the only thing that we can think is it's a vibration. It's a tone. We are being held together by vibrations, which means at some very bizarre level, you should be able to alter the vibration and thereby alter the reality. Right. It's like, that's mind blowing. Why would you say that? It's like, well, think about it. Throughout history, what was, you know, among the first true ritualistic things? It was chanting and ohms and making these noises and creating these harmonics. And that harmonics were supposed to align, you know, our energies. It's like, okay, that's spooky to think about, because all those things were stumbled upon by trial and error, only now to be like, oh yeah, I guess there is a tone to reality, and that tone dictates how everything responds.
Yeah. I mean, I my book is very controversial. I assert that God is pro-death, because everything dies, and I think that Paul changing death to based in sin is where we get all of this as outlandish, demonic evilness and all of that, where death is a completely natural thing that we go through, but we are now so afraid of it because of religion. And energy is so important. I mean, when I understood my own energy and how people react to that and how I react to theirs, just by walking into a room and knowing that someone is in a bad mood or in a really good mood. That's that energy communicating and being able to control that. And that's where I go back to, it's all within us. But as I was saying that, I also thought, well, there's also other people and they're not in me. So why wouldn't they just be a ghost, right? So even as I was asking that, it was like, well, no, I'm just responsible for me. Again, I don't believe there's any demons or, that are making me do anything. I think that's the ego that says I need to know everything, or the love to say, I'm okay with not knowing. I'm just going to try and be a good person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, there's also just the utter risk of the other people,
Right.
because you have encountered time and time again, we all have people whose intent are souring, are damaging. And if their intent is damaging, then their energy is damaging. If their energy is damaging, how much of that innervates and still affects us when they're gone, when they're not in our presence? How much of that are they feeding just solely into the air, into the ethos? And it's like, it's one thing to suggest that it's all in us. The other thing to suggest is we're all in it.
I like that. Yeah.
Because it's not mutually exclusive. If there is a pool of dark intent out there and you go wandering in, you have to have more than I'm internally mechanized.
One of my favorite,
because you're drowning then in that.
Yeah, one of my favorite sayings is energy is contagious. What are you catching and what are you spreading?
There you go.
Great.
And the scariest thing is with the concept of contagion is we can't always guard ourselves.
Right.
We don't always know what's happening. And I think that, like, if you watch any political movement or any, you can even do it with like sports fanaticism. Mm-hmm. How easy it is for people to curb their normally open intent and sharpen it to a point and be very aggressive.
Oh, we're seeing that in politics right now.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so fascinating because it's like, what is really at stake is not person to person, but it's turned into this big, like, every person feels responsible for being, the edge of a blade. And it's like, stop, step back.
Right.
Don't be the edge of a blade that somebody else is wielding.
Right. Mm-hmm. I say dick, but same thing.
And I feel like that goes the same way when interacting with spirits as well. The energy you put out is a lot of times the energy you will receive back. We saw a really big surge of this with a particular ghost hunting show. And the host of it got famous because he was very antagonizing towards spirits. So he would go into these.
Saw that. Yeah.
And that was a big thing why people, I tell people, I'm like, just because a spirit scratches you or whatever doesn't necessarily make it demonic or evil even. A lot of times, because people, especially after that show started, people will go into haunted locations and they'll start screaming, push me down the stairs, punch me. If you're real, scratch me right now. And if you're walking into, imagine a lot of these spirits were humans at one point, and humans, we are flawed. And we can get angry and whatnot. And so, and I always tell people, I'm like, imagine somebody walked into your home unannounced and started screaming for you to push them down the stairs. You would want them to get away from you as quickly as possible and try to get you out as quickly as possible. Exactly, Oberon. He's like, yes.
Totally gets it.
Yes. So, I find that it's important when you are interacting with these spirits that you treat them with the same level of respect that you would a person who is live in the flesh. Because
I have to stop you there because I just love that. That just even pushes it even further than love your neighbor, right? I mean, it goes even further than the actual physical nature of your neighbor. But I mean, working this morning and going, why do people enjoy being assholes?
Right.
Hey, you know, do you really think that your, you know, purpose in this life is to just antagonize and be a troll and all, and how do you benefit? You know, it's like, why?
Mhm.
And then when they're doing that to a non-human species, I address animals in the book, but let's take it even further to ghosts. You know, my ex used to say, I can do anything I want, I can say anything I want. And I'd say, sure. And then someone's going to punch you in the face for it.
Mhm.
You know, for every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. So, yeah, I think that that's really, you know, your attitude, your energy affects even the spirit world's influence and reactions back to you.
Exactly. Well, you know, and it's the same way that you aren't owed a response. People are like, I spent money to be here and I'm doing this investigation because we as humans have egos. We think that we are owed something always. So, which we are not, and that's just how it is. And so it's important to remember that when you are trying to commune, if you will, with spirits.
Don't
And
be,
yeah, don't be a jerk. That's
don't be a jerk. I'm sorry.
no,
Yeah.
no, I was sorry, it broke up for me, but that's usually what we say when,
That's our thing. We
Yeah.
have a
don't be a
T-shirt.
jerk.
Don't be a jerk.
There
Yeah.
you go. Well, we are at the top of the hour, and I know that we could talk forever. I just thoroughly enjoyed this show. Thank you so much, you guys, and tell JT thank you. Chris,
Absolutely.
where, any final words, and where can people find you? Chris? Oh, I lost you. You're
If you
muted.
just go walking around Savannah, you can probably see me. And
Okay.
just you can come up. No, we are the most haunted city on earth podcast. You can find us at anyhauntedcitypodcast.com, on all social media. Look for us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, anywhere your podcasts are available. We basically just do this. We sit
Yeah.
with people and we talk and we listen to stories and we
That's
just have
right.
a good time.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's great. I love it.
Exactly. And yeah, we are always posting some of our wild stories that you can find on TikTok, especially if that's your platform of choice. We are always posting on TikTok. And I see you pulled this up. Yes, if any of y'all who are listening and you have a ghost story that you would like to send to us and we can maybe discuss and break down your story, you can send it to our email that we have. It's ghostmail@hauntedcitypodcast.com. We go through all of them in order, and a lot of times there are themes, which is always really crazy. So we'll get like 3 emails in a row, all on like the topic of ghosts or Hat Man or whatever.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it's very interesting the way it syncs up like that. So maybe somebody will have a similar story to yours.
Yeah. I gotta find that picture. I got it. When I find it, I'll send it to you
Yeah,
guys.
please do. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Please do.
It's
Yes.
in Florida. It has to be in Florida, but hopefully soon.
Yes, that's awesome. Yeah, same thing for me, y'all. You can find me on Haunted City Podcast anywhere. We also have a Patreon. It is titled Savannah Underground, which was our original presentation of the show. So, and Patreon doesn't let you change things, but nonetheless,
Right?
we do have a Patreon. All of our listeners over on Patreon, we call them our para junkies. That was self-named. We did not name them that, but they are a fantastic community of people who are interested in the paranormal and every single facet you can imagine. A lot of conversation that goes on in there within themselves, even. They have group chats and for every subtopic. They get exclusive content, they get live streams. So if that's something that you enjoy, we would definitely love to have you as a para junkie.
Awesome. Any final words?
I guess for me is I'll throw my tagline for y'all.
That's it.
Stay spooky, y'all.
There you go. Thank you for starting spooky season with us. This was awesome.
Thank you so much, Sherry. We appreciate you having us.
It was great. I'm going to send you guys backstage and close the show. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you.
Another great show. Thanks for watching and your input. Hi, Beth Ann. I didn't get to say hi to you. Patrick, thank you. Thanks so much. Oh, and for Patrick. Thanks so much, Patrick Young, for continued support as the show's producer. You are rocking it. Next week's show will be a pre-recorded because the guest is in the UK and can't stay up all night to chat. Clint Heacock will be back on the show, and we are discussing his book, Not So Shiny, Not So Happy People, How Bill Gothard, Church and Family Taught Me Christianity Doesn't Work. I would bet that there would be some scary stories on that show too. Don't forget to check out my book. I want to hear your thoughts. And the follow-up course is launching in 2 weeks. It has over a dozen experts expanding on some of the topics in my book. It is so awesome, and I am so excited, and I'm actually pretty proud of it. If you like the show, share it and subscribe. Thanks again. Have a wonderful week, and as always, walk in love. Bye-bye. Mwah!